Rajajanarantano Yashodanandana Rajajanarantano Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Govijana Balava Girivadari Govijana Balava Girivadari Yashodhanandana Rajajanarantana Yashodhanandana Rajajanarantana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Govijana Vallabha Girivadari Yashodanandana Rajajanarantana Yashodanandana Rajajanarantana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parirajikacharya Stitera Sata Sri Srimad Chidandi Goswami Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parirajikacharya Stitera Sata Sri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrindi ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gop Govinath Shyamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Shri Mayapur Dham ki jai. Ganga Mai ki jai. Jamuna Mai ki jai. Tulsi Maharani ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Samaveta Bhakti Vrindi ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. So I have a request that everyone wear their masks properly, not like that. That way I can feel comfortable not wearing a mask, and that way you may be able to see the expressions on my face, which may add something, I don't know, to the discourse. Let us all be careful, and let us begin with a prayer for the health and well-being of His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj and his servants, the devotees who have been serving him, that they may be protected from any serious effect of this virus. I don't have any update myself. I met one of his disciples on the way here, and he didn't know of any symptoms appearing in Maharaj, which is a very good sign. As many of you may know, and this is important for all of us to know, someone can be affected. You could be, I could be, infected with this virus, but not have any symptoms, but be able to spread it to others. That's why we wear masks, we keep some distance, because we may be infected and not even know it. And if we wear a mask and we keep some distance, the chance of us infecting another person is reduced dramatically. It's not eliminated. It's not a wall that prevents anything from going through, but it prevents significant quantity, significant number of these small particles of moisture that carry the virus from going out. So my humble appeal, please take it seriously. It is effective, and the more we can do to keep ourselves healthy and the community healthy, that is a service to the Vaishnavas. So, Hare Krishna. Today, as you notice, we have no Bhagavatam on the stand, no verse on the board. And why is that? Because we are observing the divine disappearance day of His divine grace, Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Thakur. Shri Varsha Bhanavi Devi Dhayata Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Thakur. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, I was given not very much notice of my order to come here. I please beg, especially my godbrothers and god sister, my wife also, to forgive me for any lack I have. I tried to prepare. I tried to do something in the short time that I had, and tried to think about where we should focus on this day. We have not so much time to go into a great amount of detail. So I felt we should remember the glorious appearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in Puri, as noted by Srila Prabhupada. Adore ye, all that happy day. Blessed, what is it? Blessed in May? Anyway. He appeared in Puri, His Divine Grace. And we know the auspicious circumstances, how he was blessed by Lord Jagannath. And we know, of course, that he appeared as the son of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And this is, for us, the beginning of our relationship. Because it is through Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur that our movement, the contemporary Gaudiya Vaishnava movement, Harinam Sankirtan movement, became again revived. As I said, I haven't gotten the time to really pour into the detail. And it's always been somewhat curious to me, just how was it that after just a few hundred years, practically speaking, I think just beyond the work of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, somehow or other, the Sudha Bhakti, this is the pure Bhakti that was expounded by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, became distorted in so many different ways. Not just one. When we count the Sampradayas that emerged in those 100, 200 years, maybe 150 years prior to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's movement to revive his founding of the Vishwa Vaishnava Raja Sabha. We count at least 13 Upper Sampradayas that are recounted by Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta. I believe that perhaps the Nityananda Vamsha, those who claimed that they had the special prerogative of the movement of Lord Chaitanya being in the hereditary line of Sri Nityananda Prabhu, gave them some great position. Or perhaps the caste Goswamis, those who inherited the worship of the temples, the worship of the deities from the Goswamis of Vrindavan. Or perhaps at the same time, the Baul movement, which had incorporated the kirtan and the teachings of the concepts of Rasa Leela and Krishna worship into folk traditions and distorted them into all kinds of concocted practices. Or the Prakrita Sahajias, those who took the practices, the exoteric, the most advanced practices of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the practices that were only meant for those who had passed beyond the anartas, achieved nishtha and ruchi, to practice Lila Smarana as Raganuga Bhaktas, and took these practices and just adopted them as if they were cinema songs and common literature. This was the situation that Bhaktivinoda Thakur was witnessing. As a young man, schooled in the British system, he recognized immediately the shallowness
He writes how, as he grew up as a student, he was taught to hate the Vaishnavas for their superficialness and their distortion and their practice of immoral activity in the name of worshiping Krishna. And we know how Bhaktivinoda Thakur launched a revival. In my preparation today, I read one very interesting few paragraphs written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Puri. The Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, around the 1896 or that time, traveled with his father. By this time, he had gone through his education. He had already begun to assist Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the preaching mission. And they had traveled to different places, and now they were in Puri. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes, he describes how wonderfully he was feeling. First he begins, why am I here? Why am I not in Calcutta, the seat of my service in preaching the mission? Why am I now here? And he begins to extol the wonderful success that he'd observed in the preaching mission, how the pure Shuddha Bhakti was spreading. But then he says, something has happened. Something has happened. And he recounts the rise, or you could say the resurgence of Mayavadis, the resurgence of Prakrita Sahajas, the resurgence of those who are threatened by the Harinam, pure Harinam Sankirtan movement. And he's considering, what do I do? It's going so well. And now, what am I supposed to do? He recounts a dream in which he understands that it is the way of the Kali Yuga, he is told. The Kali Yuga is bound to put forward obstacles. And now is the time for him to do bhajan in Puri. And he erected his bhajan kutir just near the samadhi of Haridas Thakur. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta took the mission forward. He continued the work that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had begun and expanded it. Expanded it by, first of all, immersing himself in Nam Bhajan. He came here to Sri Mayapur and sat down with a vow to chant, 1 billion names of Krishna. And his vow was so strong, it said that even if his roof began to leak, rather than taking time to repair it, he took an umbrella and just held an umbrella so he could protect himself from the rain while he chanted. Hold it in this hand, I guess. He's chanting. And when he finished his vow, he felt he had, now he would begin. So as I said, I'm always poor in remembering dates and time, but I believe this was around 1918. Anyone? About 1918, isn't it? So 1918, again, the work begins in a major way. And the first establishment of the renewed and reinvigorated Vishwa Vaishnava Raja Sabha. By the way, I was always wondering, what is Vishwa Vaishnava Raja Sabha? And I had an idea that it's like the Raj Sabha of India, and it's the Vishwa, worldwide Vaishnavas Raja Sabha. And then somebody said, no, that's not right. It's the Vishwa Vaishnava Raj, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his Sabha. Okay. So the Vishwa Vaishnava Raj is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and his Sabha is this movement. So this Sabha was reestablished at number 1 Ultadanga Road, the same place that a few years later, in 1922, our Srila Prabhupada, Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada, met Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta. I read just, I think, yesterday or the day before, a curious remembrance from Srila Prabhupada, how he was talking about how the rules come later. That first comes the chanting, you start, you have to start. And when you start, you may not know all the rules and the processes and so on, but you just start. And he gave an example in his own life. He said, when I first met His Divine Grace, he was seated on a couch, and I went and I sat on the couch with him. I thought, well, we're going to have a discussion. And then he saw the other devotees sitting on the floor, and he said, oh, I think I've made a mistake here. I think I did something wrong. And he said, from then on, I always sat down. So from that meeting, as we know, the seed was planted, and the future of the movement was secured. Just as with the birth of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's work was secured. So with the meeting of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada, this movement was secured. And we are so fortunate, because there were many threats to this movement. This movement of Sudha Bhakti, pure Bhakti, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, towards the end of his as we're doing today, we're observing the disappearance. There were hints of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's imminent departure in the few months before his disappearance. He had gone to Puri, where he had his bhajan at Chatak Parvat. That place is still there, although it is recently had to be reconstructed because the hurricane that went through destroyed the structure. I was fortunate to get a little piece of the bricks, which I have on my altar, just next to a piece of the roof at Ultadunga Road. So I think which is now also being reconstructed. So he went there, and there was some hint that his health was not good. He had been suffering from some heart condition. And he began some treatment, some Ayurvedic treatment. But he went back to Calcutta a few months or a month or so later and resumed his work, his preaching work, his organization of the Gaudiya mission. But things started to take a turn. And he began to speak about how he had been preaching so strongly. I was trying to prepare for this. I was reading the wonderful volumes that Bhakti Vikas Maharaj has put together called Bhakti Sidhhanta Vani Vaibhav, I believe is. Excuse me? Bhakti Sidhhanta Vaibhav, which is not so much a history as an attempt to understand, to appreciate Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Thakur by observing his work, his writing, his mission, his messages. And at the end of Maharaj's work, he recounts how someone could look at Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta and say, look at this. And Bhakti Sidhhanta himself described this as, and I should say the same thing, look at me sitting on this big seat. In fact, I intend to make a proposal to the GBC to eliminate these. We never had these, right? I mean, do you remember? Before 1978, 79, I don't remember any seats like this for us speaking the Bhagavatam. Jananivas, Pankajandri, do you remember anything? No, we sat on a cushion, yeah, usually, that much. That was the difference, right? Anyway, I won't go there. But Bhakti Sidhhanta said, look at the arrogance of me sitting on this seat. That was his mood. But he would preach so strongly, he would say things like, there's no Vaishnavas in Vrindavan. They're all, he would be categorically against everyone, practically speaking, who wasn't exemplary in Sudha Bhakti. He would categorize, he would treat them as a class. And of course there were Vaishnava. It was not a black and white like that, but for the sake of force, the lion guru that he was, he would speak in these ways. And he acknowledged it. Srila Prabhupada did the same thing in his last days. He acknowledged that for the sake of preaching this Krishna consciousness movement, he spoke strongly. And he begged forgiveness. Because he not only spoke extremely strongly regarding the Mayavadis and the Sahajias and so on, but even his own god brothers. And why? To reinforce the real legacy of Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Thakur. The preaching movement. I was thinking about what to speak today. What can we say? And I was considering that we should focus on Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's legacy. We should focus on what he's given us. In any case, I had no time to reflect, to go back and study and review the details of his life, to be able to do a biographical discourse. But rather I reflected on what is it? What is this extraordinary gift that we must cherish? And I reflected on how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's gift is this perfect synthesis of prachar and bhajan. He actually created a symbol for his mission with the Bhagavat Marg and the Pancharatriki Marg in one holistic arrangement. You can see it on the front gate of our temple. On the one side, we have all the instruments of the Bhagavat Marg, the preaching, the printing press, the books, the Sankirtan, the mridangas. On the other side, we have the instruments of worshipping Sri Krishna in his Archamurti and in Nam Bhajan. He synthesized, he brought these together. And he made us understand, he showed us how they run just like two tracks. If you want to run a train, you have to have two tracks. It won't move without both. I thought about, well, there were no trains in Mahaprabhu's time, so what would be the analogy? And that's maybe the wheels of a chariot, right? If you want to move your chariot, you have to have both wheels. One wheel won't get you very far. So both are there working together. The Bhagavat Marg of preaching and spreading, the movement of Harinam Sankirtan, Jivadoya, Krishna Nam, Sarva Dharma Sar. Fueled by compassion, fueled by an understanding that the most dear service to the Lord is to bring others to his service. He's told us this in Bhagavad Gita, that the most dear service is when you bring others, you share Krishna consciousness. But in order to share Krishna consciousness, we have to be Krishna conscious, right? So to be Krishna conscious, we have to engage in all the angas of bhakti. And these go together. Jivatoya, Krishna Nama, Sarva Dharma, Sar. The essence of all dharma, duty, what we should do is to share the holy names of Krishna with full compassion for all jivas. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur emphasized this path, as opposed to the various interpretations of Gaudiya Vaishnavism that were prevalent at the time. You can, in fact, I was reading today, that the common idea of bhakti sadhana in the Gaudiya tradition at that time, of the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Renaissance, was Lila Smarana. The most advanced sadhana was being suggested for the neophytes. No wonder the result would be sahajya, a cheapness, a superficiality that would even go so far as to mix mundane sex life into bhakti or some idea of it. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he continued the work of Bhaktivinoda Thakur in propounding Shuddha Bhakti, and then he began to expand it even further by taking the principle of Yukta Vairagya, expounded by Rupa Goswami, and applying it to an extent never seen before. I was hoping to read a poem, maybe some of you know it, that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur penned as they were taking the deities to Bagh Bazaar. Does anybody, it's Gauranga Bange Vishaya, anybody remember it? I don't, I know you know what the poem I speak of? Something Range, Pujaya, Bhakita. Anyway, I apologize. I just didn't have time to look it up. But basically, I remember the meaning of it was that basically the servants of Gauranga employ all the externally, what appears to be externally Vishaya, the external activities that are enjoyed by the materialist, are employed in the service of Krishna in order to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Basically, that's what he was saying. And this was as they were moving into the Bagh Bazaar temple. This is Bagh Bazaar. How many of you have visited Bagh Bazaar Mat? It's impressive. It's quite impressive. Beautifully done. Very marble work and the car. Very, very, very nice. Especially, I would imagine for its time, it was quite an impressive edifice. And but we know that I don't know how many years after, maybe a few years after, towards the end of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's time on this planet, he was reflecting how perhaps it would be better to take out all the marble and sell it and simply print books. Because the devotees began arguing. In the morning of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's disappearance, seeing, you could say, the end coming, he dictated some last will to his disciples. And many of the elements, there's about 16, 17, I think, points, have to do with managerial issues. The first one being to form a governing body. That's the first point. But at the same time, he said Kunja Babu should remain as manager for life. But he wanted, he was concerned. It was a very this you can see these was like unfinished business. You know, that he was noting down, like so and so. Well, the second point was my father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, wanted something to be done for my mother. I never did it. Please build something and make a plaque and so on. And there was something about somebody being paid some money and some other little advice. But then it comes, don't quarrel amongst yourselves. And then below it, ditto, 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 ditto. Again, you know, just same thing, don't quarrel. I've heard that Srila Prabhupada comment that this quarrelsomeness that had arisen in the Mat was so disturbing that Srila Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Thakur considered it his time to depart. But his mission was already firmly established in the heart of Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami, our Prabhupada. That mission was established, that handing over had already been accomplished. So it is my personal, I don't want to, you know, reflection, rightly or wrongly, that another reason that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur felt able to leave this world at that time was that he understood that he had successfully implanted the foundations for the continuation of this movement in his dear disciple Abhay Charana Ravinda Das. Srila Prabhupada on this day reflects how his last message, this is the evidence for what I'm saying, is reflected in this. If I thought I printed it out. Oh, anyway, I guess I didn't. I did, but I didn't bring it. Hare Krishna. Too bad. But many of you can look it up. Srila Bhakti, Prabhupada mentions that just 2 weeks before, he had written Srila Bhaktisiddhanta his own letter, describing how he was feeling that he was a householder, a businessman, and that he was feeling, how can I do some personal service for you? You have your sannyasi disciples, you have your intimate associates, they're able to serve you in so many personal ways. What can I do? And we know that the response was simply that you should preach this movement in English to the English-speaking people. You should do this. This will be good for you and it will be good for others. That's or maybe the other way. It will be good for others and good for you. So this last letter received by Srila Prabhupada is an indication that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur knew. And there are many indications. If you hear the recounting of different devotees about godbrothers of Srila Prabhupada, of his interaction with Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, you can understand that on a number of occasions, there is evidence that Bhaktisiddhanta had identified Abhayacharana Aravinda as the one who would continue. And we know this because this is the exact mood in which Srila Prabhupada has continued this mission. As the servant of Saraswati, Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pracharine, Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatyadesh Tarine. He is the continuing of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's seva, which is the continuation of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, continuation of the Goswamis, and the source, Nitai Gaur. So, on this day, I suggest we reflect on our debt and our responsibility to not to follow and to expand. To follow in the footsteps and to expand this movement. Just as Bhaktivinoda Thakur revived the Namahatta, the Vishwa Vaishnava Raja Sabha, and expanded the preaching, Bhaktisiddhanta expanded it all over India. From Bengal and Orissa, it became expanded all over India. And now, by the sincere, empowered service of Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Gurudev, it is expanded all over the world. One day, our generations and generations to come will take it to the heavenly planets, right? What was it? I think it was Bhaktisiddhanta, actually. So, there was some he was watching the moon or something, wasn't it? He was observing the moon planet, and he was, yes, next frontier to preach to the residents of Chandraloka. Something like that. Anyway, that's beyond my scope to talk about. But we have this responsibility. Srila Prabhupada, our Prabhupada, knew he was responsible. He took it on. He took the order as his life and soul. He took the order that he received in his first meeting, and that was reinforced in subsequent meetings, as his life and soul. So that legacy, that teaching, we must imbibe. He had that spirit to serve Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur with his life and soul. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had his spirit of serving his Gurudev and his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and the whole Sampradaya with his life and soul. Even saying, there's a statement I read today, and related to this, saying that I'm sitting here, I'm saying these things, I may be criticized, I may be so arrogant, in fact, I may be committing so many offenses, I may go to hell for my offenses, but I'm willing to do that for the service of Krishna. And I reflected, oh, such a state. I could not say that. I'll beg forgiveness, but to actually receive, let me go to Hare Krishna. Such compassion. We know that same compassion in the example of Vasudev Dutt, who begged Mahaprabhu to give him the suffering of the entire universe so that they may be relieved. Such compassion is unestimable, just incredible. And it is real. But at least we may not be so advanced, but we can take it that it is at least our responsibility to continue the work of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the work of Bhakti Sidhhanta Saraswati Thakur, and the work of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and spread the chanting of the holy names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, to every town and village and every heart. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So I'm ending here. If anyone, maybe Pankajani or Janani Vas, if you want to add anything, we have, I guess, but anyone who needs to leave, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're certainly, you must do your service. But we can stay for a few more minutes, I think, a few more minutes. And then I think there's some other program here. So, Hare Krishna, or any other questions or comments? Otherwise, we can all continue our fast and then offer Pushpanjali to Srila Bhakti Siddhanta at noon, is it? Yeah. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.